Burro Genius by Victor Villaseñor. This is part of the opening to his memoirs. He is speaking before a convention of English teachers after publishing his first novel. He claims that it took over 260 rejections before he was able to publish this first novel. Sandy left my side, and now I was all alone, standing before one of the largest crowds of people that I had ever seen assembled, except, of course, at the Del Mar racetrack. I had no idea what to do, much less where to begin. In the bathroom, I thought of maybe just opening up my book and reading to them about the Paracutin volcano in the state of Michoacan, Mexico, where my novel begins. But then I'd also remembered how all my life I'd had so much trouble reading, especially aloud, that this wouldn't be the best bet for me. Hell, by the time I'd gotten to the 5th grade, I was so gun-shy of reading aloud that I'd rather have had the teacher hit me with her ruler and put me through the embarrassment of all the kids finding out what a terrible reader I was. My head was beginning to get hot. I took off my hat, put it on the podium, and continued to look out at the crowd of mostly all Anglo people. There were only a few blacks scattered here and there. Nowhere did I see a wide brown face like mine. I took another big breath and decided to just talk, to simply tell them how I'd researched this book by interviewing some of the guys on our ranch, and then how I'd combined the story of one main guy with two other of our vaqueros. Then I'd explain that I'd found out that interviewing people didn't quite do it. So I then actually had to cross the border myself illegally at Mexicali and work in the field picking melon from the border up through Bakersfield and then Fireball, the world capital de melon. Then I didn't know what exactly happened to me. But as I looked out at this sea of faces, and I realized that they were all English teachers, I suddenly felt my heart explode. But not with fear. No, with white-hot rage. I now knew exactly what it was that I really wanted to say. I took in another deep breath. Some of these teachers were now getting up to leave, but this didn't frighten me, just as it hadn't frightened me to go into wrestling matches where I had seen that my opponent didn't have much respect for me. In some of those matches, I'd gone in with lightning speed, taken the older, more experienced guy by complete surprise, and pinned him within seconds. "Excuse me!" I shouted, not realizing the microphone would amplify my voice into a thunderous sound. "But I understand that all of you here are English teachers." My booming voice stopped everyone in their tracks. I glanced at Karen and Sandy, who were over to the right of me some 20 feet away. It looked like Karen was just about ready to shit a brick. I closed my eyes, got my publicists and everything else out of my head, and put myself astride a 1,000-pound horse, a lo charro chingon, 10 feet tall, faster and stronger than any human in all the world. Opening my eyes, I grabbed hold of the podium before me like I do to a calf in calf roping. "Once, I had an English teacher," I said, feeling my heart leaping into my throat. People smiled, others laughed, and the ones who'd been getting up to leave now sat back down. And to this day, I hope to God, with all my heart, that English teacher dies a painful death that lasts at least 1 week. Because, I barked into the microphone as I grabbed the podium with such force that I shook its heavy oak up and down. I can forgive bad parents, because maybe it was an accident. Maybe they didn't even want to be parents. But teachers are no accident. You study to become a teacher. You work at it for years. So I cannot and will not forgive teachers who are abusive, mean, and torture kids with commas and periods and misspellings, making them feel like they are less than human because they don't or can't seem to get it right. But on the other hand, I pray to God with all my heart and soul that all good teachers who are patient, attentive, considerate, and kind to go to heaven when they die, and they are rewarded with vanilla ice cream and apple pie for all eternity. Because you see, a bad teacher like Moses, the abusive English teacher that I had in Carlsbad, kills kids here in the heart. And not just with their tests, but with their superior attitude and those sly smiles that they like to give to their A students, but never to the ones who are also working hard, or maybe even harder, like me, but just couldn't get it. I was tortured by teachers. You hear me? Tortured. I yelled, jerking the whole podium off the floor. Hell, I flunked the 3rd grade twice because I was crying so hard that I had to wipe the tears out of my eyes with the back of my hand, but this wasn't going to stop me. I was all guts up front now. I was in that smooth feeling, all true place that I got into when I'd go to my room and start writing each morning before daybreak with all my heart and soul. Truly, I shouted, understand that that I'm talking about is important. I wrote for 10 years before I got published. I'd written over 6 books, 65 short stories, and 4 plays, and received more than 260 rejections before I got published. And it was hate and rage towards abusive teachers that kept me going year after year, with the hope that one day I'd get published and have a voice so I could make a difference down here in our hearts and guts. I said, grabbing hold of my own gut, where we really live. If we're going to live a life worth living, because you see, real teaching isn't just about teaching the brain up here, I said, hitting my forehead, but also it's about inspiring your students to have heart, compassion, guts, understanding, and hope. My grandmother, God bless her soul, a Yaqui Indian from northern Mexico, was the greatest teacher I'd ever had. And do you know what she taught me? She taught me that each and every day is un milagro, given to us by God. And that work, that planting corn and squash with our own 2 hands, is holy. She taught me all this with kindness and invitation, not with ridicule and looking down her nose at me and making me feel like less than human when I didn't get it at first. I was crying so hard that I had to stop talking to catch my breath. Quickly out of nowhere, Sandy was at my side, patting me on the back and handing me a glass of water. I drank the whole glass down. I suddenly had to pee again, but I figured that I could probably hold it, I hoped. Are you okay? Asked Sandy, stroking my arm. Can you go on? I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Yes, I said, feeling my heart beating like a mighty drum. I can go on. I got to, I added. My grandmother was here at my side. I could feel, see, sense her completely. Okay, said Sandy, you're doing fine. This isn't exactly what they were expecting, but you do have their attention. I almost laughed. Sandy was right. Looking out at the crowd, I could see that I really did have everyone's attention. In fact, some were at the edge of their seats, ready to take in my every word. But others were shaking their heads and looking like they wanted to get up and leave. I glanced at Karen, who looked like she'd already shit her brick, and she was now running her index finger across her throat. I guessed that she was telling me that she was going to cut my throat once she got hold of me. I only laughed at her, too. Hell, there was no way on earth that I was going to be silenced. I'd been holding back all this fire inside me ever since I'd started school. A whole bunch of people toward the back of the room were now getting up to leave, but these teachers were not going to intimidate me. I wasn't my father's and mother's son for nada. I wasn't my 2 indigenous grandmothers' grandson for nada either. I came from a long line of people who'd lived through starvation, revolutions, and massacre. And you, I yelled into the microphone, over there in the back, we're getting up to leave. I'm glad that you're leaving, because obviously you're those bad teachers that I'm talking about. Hell, If you were good teachers, you'd be happy with what I'm saying. 3/4 of the teachers who'd been getting up to leave suddenly sat back down. I loved it. I was finally kicking ass after all these years of getting my own ass kicked. When I started school, I continued, I spoke no English, Spanish only. And we weren't invited in to learn English in a nice, civilized way. No. We were screamed at. No joke, yelled at. No Spanish, English only. And then ridiculed, called names, and hit on the head or slapped across the face if we were ever caught speaking Spanish. And Spanish was all I knew. And on that first day of kindergarten, I needed to go to the bathroom. The teacher yelled no. So I peed all over myself with pee running down my legs until it formed a puddle by my shoes. And all the kids sitting close to me looked at me in disgust, holding their noses. Then at recess, they let me have it with ridicule. That's not right. Teachers in their arrogant ways pit us kids against each other. Students against all other kids. B students feel good that they're not C and D students. Confrontation and war is what you teachers start instilling kids from kindergarten on. We need only to study history so we don't repeat it. It's a bunch of bull. Don't you get it? I said, wiping my eyes. We keep repeating history because that's what you teach. Meanness, greed, and every man and woman out for themselves without mercy. Now 2 whole tables of teachers got up and started to leave. Sit down, I barked. You're not dismissed. Class is still in session. Hell, I'm just getting started. You came to hear a writer talk, and now, by God, you're going to hear a writer speak. I will not sit down and listen to any more insults, yelled one teacher to me from about 1/3 of the way back in the room. You're just a spoiled, overpaid author, and all of us here are underpaid and overworked teachers, every day working above and beyond duty. I got $4,500 from my book that just got published. It took me over 3 years to write it. After my agent's fee, that's less than $1,500 a year. I'm not complaining and saying that I'm underpaid. I'm happy, big happy, that I got published. I think it's an honor to be a writer, just as it is an honor to be a teacher, a person who can, you just speak generalities. You're not telling us anything specific, she yelled, cutting me off. You want something specific? I said, well, I specifically don't like you. Because if you had any heart and didn't feel so guilty for being one of those abusive teachers, you wouldn't take offense at what I'm saying. So go, leave, you and all your other offended teachers. A couple of teachers applauded me a few tables away from the people who were leaving, but the teacher who spoke and about 12 other teachers left with a big ruckus, taking their book bags, coats, and purses. Well, about 90% of all the other teachers stayed, and when I was through with my talk, about 30 minutes later, a good 1/3 of them were also wiping their eyes. When I closed, I got a standing ovation of such volume and magnitude that the walls of the huge room actually vibrated. Teachers rushed to me. Karen and Sandy had to pull people away from me so that they could take me to our booth down the hall into another huge room so I could sign books. The number of people who got in line to have me sign my book was so long that it dwarfed the lines of all the other writers. And this room was full of other top-name New York publishers with their own writers, too. Teachers kept asking me if I could come to their schools to give a talk, that I'd been so real, and reality was what their students needed above all else. Others asked if I'd written any books on education. I said, no, not yet, that Macho was my first book. And Karen, she now couldn't do enough for me. She kept bringing me water, snacks to eat, stroking me on the arm and shoulder, and asking me if I needed anything to get me to give me strength to keep autographing books. I signed books for well over 3 hours. And Sandy, when I was done, came up and gave me a big abrazo, kissing me on the cheek. I just knew you could do it, she said, beaming. After reading your bio, I just knew that anyone who'd gone through so much for so long to get published had to have a floodgate holding back all that they needed to say. You did great. In fact, we ran out of your books, and the LA Times and the Long Beach newspaper are here to interview you. You mean my book is going to get reviewed? I asked all excitedly. Yes, that's too, I'm sure, but right now, they're here to do a feature story on you. That's even better than a review. It will reach people beyond those who read the book review section. You're on your way, she added. Congratulations, she said, hugging me once again. Boy, oh boy, I was flying. The 2 interviews were done in the lobby, and I had my photo taken too. Then that evening, I was alone in the bar of our hotel having a beer when a man came up to me and said, "Are you the writer who told Gladys Marsh that you specifically didn't like her in front of the whole convention?" I didn't know what to say. I was exhausted, really tired. And this man looked like a pretty physical type guy in his 40s who probably had played football and still lifted weights. And hell, he might also just happen to be that woman's best friend or husband. But what the hell? I'd done what I'd done, and so there was no backing down now. I got off my bar stool so he couldn't take a swing at me while I was a sitting duck. Yes, I said, taking up ground. I did say that to a woman teacher, but I don't know if her name is Gladys, whatever you said or not. His powerful-looking face suddenly broke out into a huge grin, and he put out his right hand. "Let me shake your hand and buy you a beer. Hell, I'm part of the teachers' union, and that woman is one of the most self-centered, abusive people I have ever had the misfortune of meeting. Always complaining about her paycheck and long hours, but never having any suggestions for helping the kids or improving the system." We shook hands, and he pat me real hard on the back. "Great job," he said, "great job. But tell me, why is it we've never heard of you before? Obviously, you're a gifted speaker and writer from everything that I've been hearing from everyone who heard you speak and is now reading your book." And it was true. All afternoon and evening, I'd been seeing people here and there reading my book, and they'd tell me that my book was excellent and that I'd given the best talk that they'd heard in years. My God, what a great feeling this was after so many years of rejection. Man, so much had happened to me since I'd driven up this morning from Oceanside. Suddenly, I felt completely drained. "I'd like to take a rain check on that beer if you don't mind," I said. "It's been a big day for me. I need to go to my room." "Okay," he said, grinning. "Have a good rest. I just wanted to shake the hand of the man who finally spoke up to that ball buster. Hell, I've known Gladys for 15 years, and no one has ever had the guts to put her in her place." "Good night," I said. "Good night," he answered, "but I have one question to ask you," he added. "Did you really have 260 rejections before you were published, or was that a publicity stunt?" I took a deep breath. "No," I said, "it's no stunt, it's real." He looked at me in silence for a long time, then said, "But surely there must have been at least one teacher who helped you along the way. It couldn't have all been negative." I took another deep breath, thought for a moment, then shrugged. He nodded. "Okay, but think about what I said. And before your next talk, because I'm sure you are going to become a frequent speaker on the circuit the way people are responding to you, it would help us immensely if you could also tell us about any good experiences that you might have had. Wake-up talks are good, but we also need to know about those teachers who had a constructive influence on you. Believe me, most of my teachers are smart enough and honest enough to admit what's wrong with our system. So we also need to know what works. Congratulations," he said, extending his hand out to me again. "I admire your perseverance, and if you could tell us how you acquired this perseverance, that in itself would help us tremendously." I nodded. I could see that this man was absolutely right. What I'd given was a wake-up talk, and there was a lot more that I still needed to learn, not just about public speaking, but writing too. But my God, my wounds were all still so fresh that it was very hard for me to remember any good experiences that I might have ever had at school. "Thank you," I said to him, and I left the bar and started across the lobby. I was feeling pretty woozy. It was a good thing that I'd accepted the hotel room that Karen had offered me. I could never have made it home. I just didn't know what had come over me when I'd looked out at that sea of English teachers. It was like my heart and soul had leapt forward with so much hate and rage that I'd instantly wanted to kill, to scalp, to massacre. And I'd been fearless, completely trusting my instincts, just like I did when I wrote. It was truly a good thing that I'd found writing as my outlet. I was sure that I would have become a mass murderer killing all those heartless, racist teachers who'd beat us Mexican kids down since kindergarten with the complete blessing of our one-sided Dark Ages educational system. Shit. By the 3rd grade, I'd been so terror-stricken of school that I'd become a regular bedwetter. I thanked me mama that she'd known how to put me to bed with prayer and song, and that she'd bought a rubber mat to put over my mattress, giving me enough hope and encouragement so I could go on. And I thanked me papa, who'd always said to me that we, los indios, the Indians, were like the weeds. That roses, you had to water and give fertilizer or they'd die. But weeds, indigenous plants, you gave them nada. Hell, you even poisoned them and put concrete over them, and those weeds would still break the concrete, reaching for the sunlight of God. That's the power of our people, my father would tell me. We're the weeds, las hierbas de todo el mundo. By the time I'd crossed the lobby and gotten in the elevator, I was so tired, I was ready to drop. Hell, I'd never spoken in public before. I hadn't even been on the debate team in school. Wow, I'd never had any idea that public speaking could be so tough. In my room, I undressed, cracked open the window, got in bed, and thanked Papito Dios for having gifted me another wonderful day in Paraiso. This was also what my old Yaqui Indian grandmother, Doña Guadalupe, had taught me to do each night. To give thanks to God at the end of each day, for every day was indeed a paradise given to us by the Almighty. Stardust was what we humans really were, my old grandmother had always explained to me, coming to this planeta as walking stars, just as Jesus had come to do Papito Dios' will on this tierra firma. I went to sleep feeling very good because I knew that I'd done my best with all my heart and soul. I didn't feel the least bit bad about how I'd gotten in those teachers' faces and told them what I really thought. After all, hadn't Jesus gotten mad at the moneylenders on the temple steps? But also, I could now understand very clearly that that man from the teachers' union had been right. There was still a lot that I had to learn. Who were those school teachers who had helped me? And what was it in my life that had given me the heart, the guts, to go on and never give up, no matter what?